one of the Karen Reed trial. Karen Reed is on trial charged with second-degree murder and a bunch of other crimes related allegedly to the killing of her boyfriend, a Boston police officer. The case got off to a very interesting start. The prosecution did one of the worst opening statements I've heard in a very, very long time. He was disjointed. He was mumbling. He was throwing out names and dates without any connection or any narrative style or story whatsoever, to the point where it sounded like he was either bored or tired or didn't even believe his own story. It was very, very strange listening to him because I know the facts of the case. I understood every word he said, yet somehow I didn't know what he was talking about. It was very, very strange. Like I said, it was very, very poor performance. It was terrible. And that was countered by the defense lawyer standing up, and the first thing he says is, "My client was framed. This is a setup. It's a cover-up by the police." And then he proceeds over the next several minutes, probably upwards of a half hour, 45 minutes, to just lay out example after example after example of the horrible things that police did allegedly to cover up this crime, to frame her, to set her up. And he was absolutely captivating. It was one of the best opening statements I've heard, which, as I said, is a stark contrast to the prosecution, which is one of the worst opening statements I've heard in a very long time. Then they got into the witnesses. The first witness, which was kind of a strange witness to be called by the prosecution, was the brother of the victim. They started out with character evidence. They wanted a character witness. And I guess just from the way the questions were phrased, I think the prosecution wanted to paint them out as an unhappy couple, and they were fighting all the time, and she was jealous and killed him out of some sort of jealous rage for something. But it didn't quite go the way the way the prosecution wanted it, I think. The witness was Paul O'Keefe, is the victim's brother. Under direct examination, he just basically gave character witness. He talked about the family. It was kind of pointless. Talked about his nicknames he had for his brother. Something about taking a trip to Aruba for their mother's birthday with the family. He talked about an argument that he saw Karen Reed and his brother have. He specifically said there was never any physical violence. And he told a weird story about how after the accident occurred and they brought his brother into the hospital, when he arrived, Karen Reed was there. She was being restrained by the police. She was screaming and crying, "Is he dead? Is he dead? What's wrong? You tell me what's happened. Is he dead? Is he dead?" And he said that he blew her a kiss, which just sounded really weird, really cold and really weird. The prosecutor, again, the same guy that gave the opening statement, Lolly's his name, his delivery and his questioning were terrible. His favorite phrases were "what if any." And if you saw the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial with Elaine Bredehoff asking "what if any" every 2 minutes, this guy was asking "what if any" or "who if anyone" every minute, sometimes multiple times a minute. It would be a horrific drinking game if you were to take a drink every time he asked "what if any" or "who if anyone." And so his top three phrases were "what if any," "who if anyone," and "sort of." He said "sort of." Well, this is sort of like that, so it's sort of like that. "What if any?" It was a weird witness telling a weird story in a weird way. Then they showed lots of videos of Karen and others arriving at the victim's house after going to the hospital. So after the incident had happened, after he was in the hospital, I really am not sure why they were repeatedly showing videos of Karen Reed driving up, of the neighbor snow blowing the driveway. And snow blowing the driveway was kind of a weird one too, because that's part of the deal. Is it seemed like they were blowing up, just snow blowing away her tracks if there had been any from the previous night. I don't know what they were trying to get across or why they were trying to get it across, but it didn't work very well. It was a strange testimony. They wrapped up the direct examination of the victim's brother with a picture of him in a 1971 convertible Ford LTD that he liked and apparently others in the family hated. And that was it. The defense said they had no cross-examination questions for him whatsoever, so he was off the stand. And if starting with the victim's brother giving character statements wasn't a little bit interesting, the next witness was the wife of the victim's brother, Aaron O'Keefe. That made even less sense to me in a way, but also in a way they seem to be a little bit closer together, Karen Reed and the victim's brother's wife, than maybe the victim's brother and Karen Reed had been. Under direct testimony of the direct questioning by the prosecutor, she testified that she lives in her house with her husband and kids. Well, that wasn't really a surprising revelation. I'm not. And she testified he was a good uncle. The victim was a good uncle. Also, surprisingly, testified he was a police officer. We all knew that. And then there was an interesting question that, of course, started with the phrase, "What if anything?" The prosecutor specifically asked the victim's brother's wife, "What, if anything, were you aware of as far as fights, arguments, issues, or anything like that?" And her response was, "I think it was a normal relationship. It was normal stuff that relationships go through, normal everyday relationship." I really don't think that's what the prosecutor was hoping for. I don't think that's what he was looking for. I think he was expecting something like they fought all the time, they yelled, they bickered, but she just said, no, they were a normal couple. So that's two witnesses in a row. The brother said he'd never seen her be physically violent, and there was one argument he could remember. And here she's saying it was just a normal relationship. Then again, there was more long testimony about this trip to Aruba and how Karen caught her boyfriend kissing somebody else in the hotel. And then she was mentioning what other people said about it. And the judge stepped in and gave instructions about hearsay testimony, just cut everything off, and on her own gave that instruction. The judge, by the way, is doing a very, very good job controlling the courtroom. I like the judge. She gave very, very good instructions at the beginning. Some of the best I've heard. I know it sounds a little bit weird, but yes, the judge gave some of the best initial instructions. The prosecution gave some of the worst opening statements, and the defense gave some of the best opening statements I've heard in a very, very long time. Anyway, back to the witness, the second witness, which, as I've said, was the wife of the victim's brother. He asked, the witness said, what she was asking when she talked to Karen Reed. Karen Reed was asking her, what the hell happened? She said, I asked Karen Reed, what the hell happened last night after they found out that the brother was dead. She dropped her husband off after a party, and then she went back to Canton where they lived, and then woke up around 4:30 and couldn't find him. So that's when she started looking for her boyfriend. Sorry, I think I said husband. Boyfriend. So she dropped her boyfriend off at a party and then went back to Canton, woke up at 4:30 a.m., started looking for him, which goes directly against the police testimony that she drove there to the house where her boyfriend was partying, ran him over with a car, smashed his head into the back bumper, drove home, and then got up and drove back around. It was very, very convoluted. And the first two witnesses contradicted a lot of what the prosecutor said they were going to show in their opening statements. So it's not off to a really great start for the prosecution. And again, there was no. Oh, and she also testified that after the night of the incident, she never spoke to Karen Reed ever again. There was no cross-examination again. The defense just let her off the stand without asking any questions. Again, I think that's a very, very smart, very, very wise decision to make. It was basic character evidence that wasn't material really to anything other than to help the defense. And so I think the defense letting it go was the proper thing to do. And the third and final witness of the day was Officer Steven Seraph. Under his direct examination, he testified that it was a bad snowstorm that night, and he was responding to a call of an unconscious person. He was the first to arrive on the scene, and he saw Karen trying to revive O'Keefe. He said she had like blood on her mouth and stuff like that. And he said that there were footprints around the body itself. And that he specifically said there were no footprints coming from the house. And I urge you, if you don't know much about this case and you want to figure out why this is a big deal, go back and watch the opening statements on the previous video I've done on the Karen Reed case. We covered the entirety of the opening statements. And that was one of the things that the defense hit out really, really hard on in their opening statement was that the Boston police officer O'Keefe that was murdered in this case, his body was in the front yard of the brother of a policeman in a house full of policemen, EMTs, firefighters, and lots of people connected to the police department, and how the homeowner was a first responder, and he never came out of his house when there's a body on his front lawn. And the police never went to the house. The police never went inside the house. The police never asked to go inside the house. They never questioned the owner of the house. And the defense also pointed out that there were police officers saying, essentially, don't worry, nope, the owner of the house is not in any trouble whatsoever. Part of the cover-up is what the defense is alleging. But I thought it was very, very interesting that the first officer on the scene said there was no footprints coming from the house, which I think it's intended to show that the victim didn't come out of the house, because that's one of the going theories, is that somebody else killed him and dumped his body there. Perhaps he got in a fight with one of the people in the house. We're going to have to see exactly which theory that the defense goes with, but that's in line with what they've been saying. So I think that's what the police officer was trying to do, was say there was no tracks coming from the house to the body, so therefore the victim never left the house. But it also shows that although 11 people, I think it was that the prosecutor said, the defense said in their opening, 11 people left the house after the party, and nobody walked towards the body that was essentially in the front yard. Again, this is shaping up to be a very, very interesting case. I know I've said again a lot, but it is shaping up to be a very interesting case. They showed some pictures of the house where the death occurred. They showed a picture. There was one laughable, but they showed a picture of a street, and the genius prosecutor says, "Do you recognize what is contained in this photo?" And the witness said, "Street?" And the prosecutor ended up getting laughed at in court. The courtroom erupted in laughter. Then they showed some footprints, a picture of some footprints in the snow around the body, which is in line with what he testified a little bit before that. And there's a video of him driving to the scene. He was parked in the parking lot next to the police station. I showed him driving. He arrived at the place about 6:10 a.m. Lots of snow. There's strong wind. You can see there. You can hear a woman yelling, and then Karen Reed. You can see her running in front of the police car, and there was a vehicle parked in front of the police car. She kept running back and forth to the vehicle and yelling, presumably to help her boyfriend. But after that, the testimony, the direct testimony, ended without comment. The defense lawyer said that he was going to have cross-examination for this witness, and so the judge said, well, we'll call it a day here, and we'll start with the cross-examination on the morning of day 2. So that's essentially a review of day 1. Again, go back to the previous video I did on this and watch the entire opening statement, and you can compare and contrast some really, really bad opening statements with some really, really good opening statements. I think the opening statement, together with these strange and seemingly pointless witnesses at the beginning, have severely hurt the prosecution's case up to this point. The defense, on the other hand, just came out swinging, very, very engaged, very, very dynamic, asserting and laying out reasons why this is a frame-up, why this is a cover-up by the police, and how they're going to show it. And they didn't even feel the need to cross-examine the first 2 witnesses. So far, I think it is a landslide in favor of the defense. We'll have to see how day 2 turns out. Until then, take care. Larax out.